A while back, I was looking through this Reddit thread about who is the worst main character you're supposed to sympathize with. A lot of the same names were popping up, but I particularly noticed a few people bringing up Evan Hansen. Now, I had heard a couple of the songs from the play and knew the premise, and Evan Hansen didn't strike me as being that bad. So, when my wife and I were looking for something to watch together and we saw Dear Evan Hansen was on Amazon Prime, we thought we'd give it a watch and see just how bad Evan Hansen is. Obviously, spoilers ahead if you care about that. Evan Hansen is a high school senior with crippling social anxiety. It's so bad that he is literally too scared of talking to the pizza delivery guy in order to order himself dinner.
So you just didn't eat last night?
I wasn't hungry.
You're a senior in high school. You need to be able to order dinner for yourself. You can do it all online. You don't have to talk to anybody.
Okay, well that's not true actually though, because the credit card's expired, so you have to meet the delivery person at the door. You have to pay them with cash at the door. You have to greet them. You have to figure out the proper greeting.
In order to help him get over his severe social anxiety, his therapist gives him the assignment of writing letters to himself, which he has to print out, presumably to bring to his appointments. After a rough first day of school, Evan writes a letter to himself complaining about how hard his life is and wishing he could work up the courage to talk to his crush, Zoe. But after Evan prints the letter out, it's stolen by Connor Murphy, an antisocial and troubled senior who bullies Evan and happens to be Zoe's older brother. A couple of days later, Evan is called to the school office where Connor's parents want to talk with him. It turns out Connor has unfortunately committed suicide, and his parents found Evan's letter to himself folded up in Connor's pocket. They assume that Connor wrote the letter to Evan, since it's addressed to Evan, and seem excited to realize that Connor actually had a friend. Evan tries to tell them that Connor didn't write the letter, but gets bulldozed by Connor's parents. He's so shy that he can't speak up and set the record straight and ends up getting invited to their home for dinner. Evan plans to tell them the truth when he gets there, but things don't go that easy for him. Zoe refuses to be sad about Connor because he made her life a living nightmare, and she begins to badmouth him right away. Connor's mom begs Evan to tell them something about their friendship, or anything positive about Connor to prove that he did have a good side. And Evan can't bring himself to dash her hopes and say that he and Connor were never friends, or that Connor stole the letter from him. So he makes up a story about how he and Connor were secretly best friends and would write each other letters and emails and were together when Evan broke his arm. And with that one lie, Evan's life would be changed forever. All right, guys, my wife is going to read the next paragraph of script, so hope you enjoy a little break from my voice.
As you would expect, Evan has to tell more and more lies in order to prove that he and Connor were friends. He writes pages and pages of fake emails between himself and Connor and gives them to the Murphys as evidence of their friendship. In these emails, Evan paints a false picture of Connor and himself in which Connor loved his family and wanted to do better, but didn't know how to, while Evan himself was an encouraging friend who tried to be a positive influence on him. When Connor's family reads these emails, they feel like they are finally meeting the real Connor for the first time, like they are finally getting to see a good side of him they never knew, and they can finally begin to process their grief. Only the person they are grieving isn't the real Connor. They are grieving a false version of him, and when they find out the truth that there wasn't a good side to Connor, his death is even more devastating.
But the trouble doesn't just stop there. The Murphys end up taking Evan in as a sort of surrogate son and become a second family to him, and Evan takes full advantage of their kindness, pretending that they are his real family and pushing away his own mother. Evan's dad left when he was a boy and wants nothing to do with Evan or his mom. Evan's mom has to work overtime hours every week to provide and often can't be there to support Evan. The Murphys, on the other hand, are rich, and Connor's mom doesn't need to work and becomes a big emotional support to Evan. Evan begins to spend long hours at the Murphys' home, lying to his own mom about where he is and sometimes even bailing on her to spend time with the Murphys instead. When Evan's mom figures out what's going on, she's obviously extremely hurt by Evan's lack of gratitude for everything she has sacrificed for him. But maybe worst of all, Evan uses his false friendship with Connor to become close with Zoe, his crush, and Connor's younger sister. Evan takes advantage of her emotional vulnerability, and Zoe actually begins to like Evan and they start dating. One of the most uncomfortable songs in the whole play is If I Could Tell Her, in which Evan tells Zoe all the things that he loves about her, as if they were things that Connor had told him about her. Zoe begins to think that Connor really did care for her and begins to open up to Evan, eventually falling for him because of the lie that he and Connor were friends. But Evan doesn't just lie to Connor's family. He also lies to his entire school, and through a speech that goes viral, his lie spreads to the whole world. The student body president of their school asks Evan to speak at a student led memorial service for Connor, which the Murphys attend. Evan, though struggling greatly at first, gives a speech about Connor that ends up going viral and kickstarts a huge movement about mental health awareness and suicide prevention. In a few moments, Evan goes from being that weird, socially awkward freak to an internet celebrity. Everyone at school now loves him, he has a better and new family, and he's dating the girl of his dreams. And all this happened because he lied and took advantage of the grief of others. Now, there's no denying that what Evan did is pretty messed up. But just to be totally fair, I want to point out that Evan never intended to take advantage of Connor's death like he did. Evan could never have imagined that by pretending to have been friends with Connor, he would get the girl of his dreams, a rich second family, or internet stardom. He only lied because he was too spineless to be the bearer of bad news to Connor's mom. But that doesn't mean it's not Evan's fault. Evan is still 100% responsible for all the pain he caused Connor's family, and social anxiety is no excuse for him to have lied over and over again. I mean, even if he couldn't work up the courage to tell them the truth in person, he could have at least written them a letter or something. But he wasn't a psychopathic mastermind who came up with a plan to benefit off some poor kid's suicide. He didn't lie because he wanted to gain from it. He lied because he was too weak to tell the truth. And I think that makes him actually pretty relatable. But if you're still convinced that Evan Hansen is a totally evil protagonist, let's look at how the story ends. When the truth eventually comes out, it's not because Evan gets caught in his lie, it's because he decides to tell the truth to protect Connor's family. When the original letter that Connor stole gets posted online, an internet mob begins harassing and attacking the Murphys as a bad family who wasn't there for Connor, and blaming his suicide on them. The Murphys are obviously greatly distressed by all this, and Connor's mom begins to believe the mob and think that they didn't do enough for Connor, and that's why he killed himself. It's at this point that Evan decides to tell the truth. Connor didn't kill himself because his family failed him. Connor didn't feel that way because Connor didn't write that letter. Evan did. Evan tells them the truth because he realizes his lie has come back around to bite not just him, but them too. Evan expects the Murphys to go public with the truth, but they shockingly keep it to themselves because they don't want to direct the online mob towards Evan, in spite of how horribly he's hurt them. When Evan realizes they're continuing to bear the hate to protect him, he goes public with the truth himself. He posts to his tens of thousands of followers that he lied about everything from the beginning and loses not only his second family and girlfriend, but all the fame and acceptance that he enjoyed before. He willingly gives up all of this because even though he took advantage of the Murphys, he still cared about them and didn't want them to suffer anymore because of what he had done wrong. Not only this, but after the truth comes out, Evan works really hard to get to know who Connor really was. He starts reading through all of Connor's favorite books and begins contacting all of Connor's social media friends to try to find out anything he can about Connor. He ends up finding a recording someone made of Connor playing a song he wrote at a rehab meeting, and is able to share that with the Murphys, who finally have something good to remember about Connor. Of course, this doesn't make up for how Evan has hurt them, and though he and Zoe end the movie on good terms, it's clear Zoe will need a lot of time and space to heal before she can ever even be just friends with Evan. But Evan doesn't regret his decision to tell the truth. He knows what he did was wrong and tries to do what he can to make up for it. Now, let's compare Evan Hansen with a protagonist who is truly evil, like Kaya from Where the Crawdads Sing. Major spoilers starting now. Kaya literally gets away with murder and isn't remorseful in the slightest. Or how about Abby from The Last of Us Part 2? Abby murders Joel after he actually saves her life. Compared to Kaya and Abby, Evan Hansen is a saint. On a slightly unrelated note, there is one thing I really like about the story of Dear Evan Hansen. At the beginning of the story, Evan is completely enslaved by his crippling shyness. No amount of encouragement from his mom or his therapy seems to help him with it. But when Evan lies about being friends with Connor, he has to keep stepping out of his comfort zone in order to keep the lie going. He faces his fears more and more until he eventually gives a speech in front of his entire school. I said earlier that when the truth comes out, Evan loses everything. But that's not exactly true. He loses everything except the confidence he developed by stepping out of his comfort zone. The irony of Dear Evan Hansen is that even though lying about being friends with Connor was a terrible thing to do, the fear of getting caught in his lie was the only thing scarier to Evan than actually facing his fears. That irony is something I really like about the story. So, what do you guys think? Am I being too nice to Evan Hansen? Let me know what you think in the comments. And just to be clear, I haven't seen the stage play, so if the movie portrays things differently or makes Evan look better, definitely let me know in the comments. Thanks so much for sticking around to the end of the video. Can't wait to hear from you guys.